Calling to order the Housing and Human Welfare Committee on September 18th, 2018. I'll start with a roll call of everyone in attendance. I'm Alderwoman Shanika Henson, Committee Chair. To my right is,
Ellie Tierney, present.
and to my left.
Fred Payon.
Thank you. The first order of business is approval of the minutes from our last meeting. We have approval of the minutes from the meeting on June 19, 2018, prepared for us by Ms. Green. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved in second. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. The motion carries. Next on our agenda is appointment of Andre Atkins to the Board of the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis. Mr. Atkins, if we can have you join us at the center table, sir. And then make sure your microphone is on with the green dot at the bottom lit. And then if you'll state your name for the record, please.
Andre Atkins.
Mr. Atkins, first, thank you for being willing to serve on the Housing Authority Board. We have some questions for you. The Housing Authority Commissioners are kind of a special set in the city code. It requires you all to have the same ethics disclosures as elected officials and city employees. So the questions that I have for you will be basically derived from the code, and then just a few questions as well so that we can make an informed decision on you being a good choice for the Housing Authority Board. So my first question to you is, can you please describe your experience working in government, nonprofit, or public sector type of work?
Well, most of my life I was self-employed. I have, since I've been here in Annapolis, Maryland, I was in the taxi business for 20 some odd years, and later went on to do security work. I started with a company called Always Available Security. Then I moved from there to Securitas, which took over.
Mr. Atkins, I'm being told by Ms. Green that your microphone is not on. If you hit the button that says.
Oh,
Okay.
now, yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
Okay, I've been here since '93. I've been self-employed most of my life. Since being here, like I say, I was in the taxi business. I own my own cabs with Annapolis Cab, then Reliable. As I got older, I took a job with Always Available Security, which was a small security company here in Annapolis, Maryland, owned by a local gentleman by the name of George Kelly. Near the end of that, I started working with Securitas. Actually, Securitas took over Always Available Security. And basically, I've been stationed at the Severn Bank for 10 years. And I work at other places like the Lowe's, Weston, like that.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Could you describe any prior experience you have serving on a board or commission?
Well, as far as serving on a board, I served on the Ross Grant Commission. Back home in Delaware, I was vice president of our local tenant association. And I'm also president of the Tenant Association here in the Harbor House Eastport Terrace. As far as boards, that's the length of my experience.
Could you please describe any past experience you've had with the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis? Any opportunity that you've had to engage the residents there and or Housing Authority officials?
Well, again, I'm president of the Eastport Harbor House Tenant Association. Have been so for 4 years. I've worked tirelessly, or as much as I could, to try to improve conditions of HACA in general and Eastport Harbor House in particular. What was the rest of your question?
It was any experience you've had with the Housing Authority
Okay.
residents, board members, or officials?
I've also served, I am serving still on the grievance committee, which we hear cases of people that have problems with the Housing Authority. So that's the extent of my involvement.
Can you describe any past experience you've had with ensuring compliance with HUD regulations?
The only experience I've had with HUD regulations earlier, before I came to Annapolis, we got houses ready for Section 8, and we used to have to keep up with the code. That's the only experience I've had with HUD.
And then can you describe to us any experience you have working with complex budgets and funding sources?
Well, I haven't worked with complex budgets. The Harbor House Eastport Terrace budget is not that large. I did, when I was with Always Available Security, I did assist George Kelly with the budget, with the payroll. I also had to budget and manage my own taxi business. But again, that's the extent of my experience in that. I might say the things I've been doing it for 40 years.
One of the things that the code requires is that you have to name all businesses with which you have a financial interest. And then financial interest is defined as a business that in the past 3 years you have received $1,000 or more in compensation, or you have at least 3% of the ownership. The goal here is to identify any businesses that you may own that may do business with the city of Annapolis. So are there any businesses?
I own absolutely no business whatsoever.
And then the code also asks that regarding your spouse as well. Do you have a spouse?
Yeah.
And then does she own any business that may do business with the city of
No,
Annapolis?
she does not.
The next thing that it asks is if you have a business that's currently negotiating a contract with the city of Annapolis or being regulated by the city of Annapolis.
No, I do not.
And then it asks that for your spouse as well.
No, she does not.
There's a provision in the code that states that the subject matter that you're working on for 1 year, during your term, and then for 1 year after your term, you would agree to not participate significantly for compensation in any matter that was the subject matter for which you were serving the city of Annapolis. So would you be willing to agree to not participate for compensation on anything related to?
Yes, absolutely.
And then it also puts regulations on you accepting gifts. It sets a dollar amount. My notes don't have it. I believe it may be $35, but it would also prohibit your ability to personally accept gifts from people that were doing business with the housing authority. Would you be willing to comply with that as well?
Yes, absolutely.
It asks you if you would be willing to not disclose confidential information. Would you be willing to not disclose the confidential information you receive as a board member?
Absolutely.
And then my final question is, would you be willing to not participate in procurement? So if you did open a business, would you be willing to have that business not do business with the housing authority for as long as you were a board member?
I do agree not to.
Thank you, sir. Those were my questions for Mr. Atkins. Do any of our other committee members have questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Yeah. On your resume, you quote, you want to be the voice of reason. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
I feel that all the residents and people are not being heard. From what I could see from a distance, it always seemed not to be organized or not to take into account what the residents feel as well as the business end. I would like to be a bridge between that. I would like to be, I guess I couldn't say any better, a conduit. I would like to be able to get the housing authority to move forward. We're in a time that we need harmony. And if I could help create harmony, I would feel like I'm doing my job.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
I have no questions, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Atkins is thoroughly qualified for a position on the HACA board and plan on supporting him strongly.
Thank you, Alderman Payon. I'll note, Mr. Atkins, on your application to the board, you did list me as a reference. So I'll just note for the record that I've had the opportunity to do lots of work with you in the community and to see firsthand the great care and detail and attention that you show to both the properties that you are the tenant council president on. You make a great effort to make sure that people come to the communities, that when they are making decisions that affect the lives of the residents there, that they are doing it with full awareness and knowledge of what it is like to walk the grounds there at the housing authority. So thank you for your advocacy and for giving me the opportunity to work with you so much that you would feel confident in listing me as a reference on your application.
Thank you. Once I thought about it, I hope it wasn't incorrect. At the time, I didn't know you was chairman of the board, but thank you, and I hope I could do more. We really need to push HACA forward. There's a need for public housing in this city, and the only way it's gonna work if we work together.
Absolutely. Is there a motion to recommend favorably Mr. Atkins for appointment to the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis?
I would make that motion, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
I would second that motion, Madam Chair.
It's been properly moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
Well, thank you, and if I'm placed on the board, I'll do my best to make you guys proud.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Atkins, I'm getting a note from Ms. Green to let you know that this will go before the full city council on the 24th. If you are approved that night, they may have you swear in and take the oath of office that night, so I presume Mr. Rao should be in contact with you next week about attending the full city council meeting where the full council will vote on your appointment to the Housing Authority Board. Yes, sir.
Next Monday night.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The next order of business on the agenda is the update from Planning and Zoning. I do not see Mr. Gutwald in attendance, but I have had the opportunity to review the Planning and Zoning project under review spreadsheet. He did give us the benefit of highlighting those items that have changed from our last review of it in July by indicating them in red. It looks like there are a number of projects that are moving further through the process. It does not look like there has been any changes to those units that are developing moderately priced housing. I know that's one focal point of this committee, is that we're keeping an eye on who's opting to pay the fee in lieu and who's bringing affordable housing to the city. But in the absence of Mr. Gutwald, I will just note for the record that we did review the report that was submitted. The next order of business is the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance 0818. We do have Alderman Savage as well with us, who is a sponsor of that legislation and perhaps able to give us some greater insight and understanding of the status of it. We've had this on our agenda for several meetings, and we have delayed taking a vote on it to defer to some of the other committees who were bringing in people to testify and doing some other more in-depth work on the legislation. So Alderman Savage, can you bring us up to speed on the status of 0818?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for granting me some time. I don't mean to impose. But I did want to, I thought there'd be some benefit to updating you on what the Rules and Government Committee has done. So at our last meeting, we did have a representative from the school district in attendance. And what we basically asked them about was what the county passed with their own.
Oh, I'm sorry, was this the rules and regulations?
At the Rules and Government Committee meeting, yeah, it was a few weeks ago.
Yeah, okay.
Or maybe last week, time flies. So our question is focused on what they had passed in the county. This is a few months ago, I believe, the county passed theirs. So what we found out is they passed one that was 95, it said 95% for the cap, for the threshold about what's considered capacity for the elementary school system. They said 95% for the middle school and 100% for the high school. So it's 95, 95, 100. And along with that, they had a sunset provision, which was timed with their general development plan. So around that time, it's not a full sunset though. Around that time, it's going to revert to either whatever they decide to set new, or it's going to go right down to 100, 100, 100 for the thresholds. So basically and the committee has not developed recommendations yet, but we did talk with the law office. They're drafting some for us. What we spoke about was essentially just matching the county's recommendations, whatever they end up adopting, and even in the future is just kind of piggybacking whatever they adopt. Except for the unit threshold that we have. Remember, the county has, I believe, a 3 or 4 unit threshold for the minimum when this kicks in. The cities is, I believe, 7 units. And so what we were going to recommend was that we stick with our 7 units, and in terms of how it's determined whether or not a school is at capacity in terms of figuring out which one is open or closed, we were going to stick with the planning and zoning department's methodology that they currently use instead of adopting the counties, because Director Gutwald said they have their own calculations based on anticipated future development, and so we didn't want to interfere with that. So that's where we did speak very briefly about the affordable housing, which might be relevant for the committee. Just so you know, the county did not include any kind of exception for affordable housing, though they did carve out a couple of growth areas, Parole, and I think Parole was one, and Oneyton perhaps was another, in the BWI area. They didn't really seem to have an opinion on the affordable housing. That was up to us to decide. And if I don't know if the planning and zoning, I'm not sure if this got uploaded to be part of Granicus, but planning and zoning did send out some numbers about the capacity according to their calculations. And so for this fiscal year, there are, for 2018, all the schools are under capacity, under 100%. 2009, the high school goes up to 101%. 2020, the high school is also the only one over capacity. And then in the future, it's anticipated that Mills Parole will also go over capacity, but all the others are under. That's all.
Alderman Payon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The part of this that gives me a problem is 95%. Why isn't it 100%? I mean, 95% doesn't seem logical to me. It seems like it would have an effect of cutting off all development of new housing, including workforce housing or federal housing. 95% means they're not even at capacity, yet we will in effect stop any and all development in the area. I can easily go for 100%. That's a little more logical to me. I mean, if they're already full, I think the legislation makes sense. Just because they're close to being full, not so much. I think most of us agree that development, long-term at least, is probably necessary as a new tax base, expanding the tax base. And my great fear is that the lower we go on the percentage, the more likely that is to happen. Taxes go up, services go down. I don't have any problem with the principle of APF legislation, but I just think it ought to be 100%, not 95. You care to comment?
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we did talk about that a bit at the Rules and Government Committee. I don't recall exactly why the school or the county decided to go with 95%. But because I know Alderman Arnett and we've chatted about just going back to the 100%. But if I recall correctly, we decided just to go with the school's current numbers instead of.
Well, I'm someone who spoke up. I know when we had the original APF legislation, I think it was about 2 years ago, come in front of the council, and I thought it was ridiculous that we didn't have the same standards the county has. But the county's much larger. They can take people from Severna Park High School and send them to Chesapeake High School if they want to. I mean, they've got luxuries that we don't have because of their size. And I'm beginning to see that maybe we need to be at least a little bit different in this regard from Anne Arundel County itself. Do you have any huge problem with that? Differentiating the legislation to that extent? I mean, it seems like it's pretty minor to me, but it also seems like it's logical.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with 100%, but I know the original, what we were trying to do with the Rules and Government Committee was to just keep it simple. It would be just a reference to the county's current numbers. It wouldn't actually set 100, 100, 100. So if we set 100 in our legislation, then we would have to go back and change it in the future is the only thing, if we decide to match what the county's numbers are.
Well, we don't have any control with what the Board of Ed, over the Board of Ed anyway, unlike the county council, who can just stop sending the checks if it came down to that. Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This legislation has really tested, how I feel about development and some of our priorities, and I've been doing a lot of research, with it. One really good piece of literature is the transition report that was done on land use, and there is no dispute, nor should there be, that this legislation is noble in purpose. I mean, nobody wants overcrowded schools, but my problem is that we're getting mixed signals about development. From the mayor, was supporting development on Spa Road, and this has been postponed because it's kind of this hot potato, and I'm beginning to, from the context of affordable housing, I know that would probably have to be a carve out, and then you get down to this sort of, excuse my language, this bastardized legislation that doesn't do anything. We don't want overcrowded schools. What does this do? And I think that we need a reset button on our vision for development, our collective vision as a city council. I think this is kind of a work session thing. Like, why are we, treating this like a hot potato? What are the issues? Every job should be evaluated on its own merit, I think, environmentally as the focus first. And then, we don't have a say really in the school redistricting, so that's a big deal. So I think we have to look at it from a project standpoint. Is this going to be doing more harm than good? When I talk about mixed signals, you read the fiscal analysis of this and it says, well, we're not going to get permit fees and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, that's a disagreement with it. So I'm just not ready to vote when I don't know if this is actually going to serve the objective. And I don't think we agree on the objective. Some people look at it as an anti-development tool, and some people look at it very passionately, as I would, as we don't want overcrowding. And I don't know if this is the effective tool to address that. So I don't want to have legislation that doesn't do anything. So I yield.
I would agree with a lot of what you just said, all of that. Yeah, even when you look at the Forest Drive sector study, it cautions against becoming a bedroom town. And I think that this would promote, if we're going to develop, to have development that brings jobs to the city, that's more on a commercial, maybe retail end. It doesn't close the door on development is the narrative, but it does open the door for developing things that are not places to live. It still leaves that ability there. I think that it is the 120% that was in the code, that's currently in the code, I think is woefully inadequate. So to address that 120%, I think is something that needed to be taken on, but I wholeheartedly understand what you're saying on, are we taking it on effectively if we do so much to the intent of it that we kind of veer away from it being useful. So I do understand that. It sounds like the committee at this time may not be prepared to vote. It sounds like if we voted today, it may be not recommending it favorably.
Well, I was actually going to move to amend Amend it to 100%.
Okay. To 100% of the elementary and middle and the high school as well?
Yes.
It sounds like amending the elementary and middle may be something, or the high school to 100 may also be coming out of the Rules and Governance Committee, but we as a committee could certainly amend to 100% for elementary and for middle.
I would make that motion to amend, Madam Chair.
I'm gonna work on a motion to do a carve-out for affordable housing. I know that our HACA properties are going through a transition. I can imagine they'll be asking to add density to the property so that they can do some mixed use, because it seems that that's the nationwide trend, that's where they get the most preference points for funding dollars, is if they have housing that addresses market rate as well, not to just have concentrations of low-income housing. So I don't know that I need to do it from the committee. I can just propose it as an amendment myself, but because I don't have the language prepared right now to add that in. But it sounds like Alderman Payon is proposing that we amend it from 95% to 100%. I will accept that as a motion to amend. Is there a second on his motion? So it sounds like it's not the will of the committee to amend it at this time. It sounds like what Alderwoman Tierney is saying is that perhaps we should have a work session where we kind of have the cart before the horse, where we are amending it to serve a goal, but we haven't identified yet what the goal is. So we're kind of working the end way around.
Yeah. And you brought up another, a good point, Madam Chair, is as we speak, the forest sector study is not yet finalized, and is this the driver of that, or is it going to be, edited to accommodate that, as well as the comprehensive plan? I mean, again, I'll use the term reset. I think we need a reset on our vision of development in the city before we do these measures. If you're treating this as a anti-development tool. So I would motion to postpone the vote.
I would second the motion. All in favor of
I don't believe the chair can second the motion.
Oh, pardon me.
I did not know that either.
There's a motion on the floor to postpone the
I'm
vote.
not 100% sure about that, but I don't think you can.
Would you, Alderman Payon, are you more inclined to just not recommend it favorably and then just have your say with your individual vote from the full meeting of the council, or are you inclined? Alderwoman Tierney, if we postpone, what outstanding factors are you looking at for making a decision?
I think we need to meet as a group, because I think we have all different viewpoints and focuses on development that need to be heard. I'm not sure which one of us can talk about school capacity, again, because it's not in our jurisdiction, but I'd like to hear, the city manager talk about the fiscal part of it, as far as what that would do. And just to emphasize, I don't want this to pass and think that we solved something. So I'm not sure who can answer that question, maybe the city attorneys. But we can't do this in a vacuum, and it's a kind of a county issue too. We'll all feel good about passing it, 100, but it's gonna be, it's gonna be brought up again and again, and amended and carved out, and so I just hesitate, and I guess I can't answer your question. I'm not sure what is the magic bullet for this to be a workable piece of legislation, or does it just make a statement?
Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I mean, the objective is to focus on doing what we can in the city to make sure the schools stay under capacity. I know if we were to pass different percentages than the county, the worry would be we would be undermining the capacity levels of schools that overlap both the city and the county, right, and overlap standards that they've set for other parts of the county. This is certainly not about stopping development. There are various mitigation options that developers have through the county ordinance. They can donate property, and I think there may be a few other things in there. I need to review. So there are options out there, and they also can just wait, I think it's 5 years, I think, to do their construction, because that gives the school a chance, the district a chance to redistrict and do whatever else that they feel like they can do to adjust the numbers. So, but it's by no means meant to be anti-development. And I mean, there was talk about affordable housing. I mean, my concern is, I do want to see the affordable housing increase in the city. I've been a long critic of how we've given too many exceptions and variances to the moderately priced dwelling unit program, but and at first I was kind of amenable to making that adjustment, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that I think there should be two separate issues. Affordable housing, unfortunately, has a larger impact on our schools because they tend to have larger families, and so if the intention of this ordinance is to address school capacity, that would unfortunately work directly against the intention. But I completely understand wanting more deliberation. If I can make a recommendation, it's something the Rules and Government Committee wasn't able to pull together in time, but I know the Annapolis Education Commission has looked at this in the past when it was considered by the previous council, and I know they support this initiative, but I'm not sure what exact percentages they would recommend if they've gotten that far in detail or not. But they certainly have expressed to me when I spoke to them before the committee meeting that they do have concerns about the school capacity.
I'll just wait for, yield the floor to Alderman Payon. You stated that affordable housing generally comes with larger families. I don't know if you mean larger families than other family sizes, but I don't know that I would agree that affordable housing has larger families than other family sizes. I think sometimes by definition, it may be more of a challenge to afford a larger family if you are eligible to live in an affordable housing community. So I don't know if you meant as opposed to families that have no children, that they generally are families with children, or if you meant as opposed to families with children, that those in affordable housing have more children than families that have children on average. I'm not sure which your statement was, but I would just push back on that a little. Alderman Payon.
Thank you. Madam Chair, it seems if you're going to add an amendment to have a exception for affordable housing, then I'd reconsider my not seconding a motion to continue this, because it's obvious to me that even though this thing has been around for God knows how long, it's not quite ready for prime time yet, and there are a couple of amendments that members of this committee alone want to make, and maybe it is a subject for a work session. Although we've got other things in addition to this, but this is going to turn out to be, I think, the longest standing legislation in the in my 10 years on the council. But that doesn't mean that we ought to vote on something that isn't ready to be voted on. And I think maybe it is a good idea to continue this and suggest a work session.
Is that
I mean, I don't know what the other committees have done or have even talked about. It probably would be helpful to know what their discussions have been, and maybe that would solve the problem. But I think from where I'm sitting right now, it doesn't seem like it's ready to be voted on tonight.
It sounds like we have a full agenda at the next upcoming work session. Is the committee comfortable with it being postponed to the October work session to maybe get on the agenda there to be discussed? I think your point about making sure we are having dialogue with the other committees to know what challenges, concerns, proposals they're raising may be addressed in a work session.
Look, when we passed the original legislation 2 years ago, we weren't replacing anything. It was the first time we have had any legislation on the books. This time, well, we may not be happy with what we have right now, may or may not be. The fact is we at least have something on the books, and I think for that reason the delay is not perhaps as onerous as it might have been with the original legislation. So I for one, not happy that it would be at our October work session, but that might be the best we can do.
And Alderwoman Tierney, did you have a position on delaying it? I know you moved for postponing. If that postponement means that we can't address it until after an October work session, does that change the nature of your request?
No, that's in line with my request. I would also, I think the input from the Annapolis Education Commission is vital. And again, I can't emphasize enough that we really need to state what the clear objective of this legislation is, and I apologize if the optics of when this was issued a couple years ago, coincidentally it was in the it was called Crystal Springs at the time. It had reached a critical mass, if you will, and this was rolled out, and so the optics people looked at this as like a Hail Mary in stopping Crystal Springs. I'm sorry, that's what the optics were from the audience, basically. I was not on the council at the time.
Well, I think that's what it was about at the time.
Well, there you go. And it's kind of, morphed into that, and then you lose sight of what the real objective is overcrowding of schools, which nobody can disagree with, and what's the most effective way of handling that, and what is our vision. And again, I look at this transition report on land use. What is our collective vision, including the mayor, of future development in Annapolis, because I know they differ, and we probably all have something to add. So my motion still stands on postponement.
Is there a second?
Second. Actually, I didn't, well, okay, never mind.
It's
Went
been
back and forth.
properly moved in second. All in favor on postponing, state aye.
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 The ayes have it, we will postpone.
Took liberty with properly
Right, now it's proper. The next item on the agenda is food handling establishments, polystyrene food products, ordinance 02218. Did we, Ms. Green, did we have anyone signed up to speak? I see we have guests. Did you all wish to be heard by the committee or sign up to speak, or here just in observance? Excellent, thank you. We did take up this legislation back at our meeting in June. We did have the county health office before us, and we did ask them for the benefit of a staff report, more or less, to give us some information. They did submit to us the polystyrene health effects, environmental safety, and regulation, a report to the administration. They drafted this report in preparation for the county's polystyrene ban, so it does have the county proposed legislation attached and then the staff report as well. But from the health office, we asked for the report so that we, as the human welfare end of what we do on this committee, could address the polystyrene ordinance. We do have an environmental matters committee that will address the environmental aspects. We have economic matters, rules in government, things that will address the city's function in enforcing it, things that will address any impact it may have on the business community. But I feel that our scope is really narrow, and that is looking at it simply from a human welfare end. I felt like the report was very balanced. It gave data. I appreciated that it cited the sources for its data. It does have a reference guide at the end of it, and then where the information was not solid, they didn't pontificate. I felt like they put it out there when they could. They did indicate that symptoms related to styrene exposure, and then even before getting there, they did do a breakdown of how, a little bit on the chemical compositions and how it goes from one chemical to another chemical, and then the effects of the chemicals. It states the symptoms related to styrene exposure include nervous system depression, drowsiness, headaches, and disturbance in balance, slow reaction times, and issues with concentration. It indicated later that styrene has been determined to be a probable human carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. It indicated that with regard to any carcinogen effect, that it was lymphatic cancers that it was at risk of, but that there had been no evidence to suggest that it was any relationship to solid tumors. It did cite the National Toxicology Program as well, which had indicated that it was reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen. it did indicate, that they did a look for data at the Baltimore trash wheel, and they looked at the trash wheel to see what was being collected from it, and noted that polystyrene containers was the second most prevalent environmental hazard that was found there in Baltimore in the trash wheel. They cited that that was the closest sampling of data that they could get to kind of understand what our exposure is. They kind of went over what the risks are, and then what our exposure is with the current laws in place that we have now. So I felt like it was a good report, and it was well served to help inform the committee on making a decision. Were there any other comments on the ordinance before us or the report from the county health office?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have 2 comments. As far as the report, I thought it was, well, other, cigarette butts, hello, did you see, oh my God. But what was significant to me was, even though, it had a percentage, in the Baltimore study, and it was, it was second, but it was still sort of a small percentage. But then when you looked at what the impact of it was to the species of fish, off the coast of New England, which is, near and dear to my heart. I was born there. It's like, whoa, it's bad. I mean, it's sort of unproportionally bad for the quantity there is. The effect is, it's sort of out of proportion. So, but as far as, I know we're probably going to vote on the bill, maybe if we do, there's an amendment as well. And what happened, as we know, the county rejected it. And I'm very proud of the fact that we're trying to implement this within the city limits, which the county inspectors can do. They'll just have to say, well, this is a place in the city, and this is their rules, and oops, we're over the line, we're in the county, and this is their rules, and that's how it's amended. And I'm very proud of the fact that we're making the effort to do this, and I'm also very proud of the restaurants, including the Market House, that have don't use, styrofoam. So yeah, I'll wait to hear what my colleague, Alderman Payon says before I make any motion.
Thank you. Your points are well taken. Perhaps we will help to put some wind in the county sail and kind of be the leader on that, and that maybe in the next session, or when a different county council is reconvened, maybe there will be a will of the body there to join us, if the council so passes it, to take a lead there. Alderman Payon, did you have anything you wanted to add to the discussion?
Nope.
We do have the chair of the Environmental Matters Committee here with us. Alderwoman Tierney did reference the amendments that the Environmental Matters Committee is proposing. Alderman Savage, can you speak to those amendments?
Sorry, who provided this to you?
I believe that you all passed some amendments that you were seeking to institute. It was striking out a few for providing for penalties and violations. I believe it was lines 4, lines 23. And then also you all had
yes.
referenced the county provision that was adopted as well. I'm assuming that all references to the county provision would be stricken?
Yes, Madam Chair. We have a committee meeting tomorrow, and we're gonna be revisiting these amendments because they were under the assumption that the county was gonna pass theirs. So, yeah, we're gonna have to actually, we may end up striking all these amendments.
Oh, I thought they were in line. Are you sure? Sorry.
We'll talk about it more at the Environmental Matters, but at least Amendment 3, I know we're going to have to, because I'm sorry, that just substitutes the date. Which one am I looking for?
Amendment 2, I believe,
Yeah.
is the one that references the county code.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, Amendment 2 is the one that
Yeah.
I believe we're going to have to get rid of, because that essentially got rid of the entire piece of legislation and just referenced the county provision. Since there's no county provision to reference, we're going to have to strike that out and make these other revisions. So the committee is going to have to figure out, I guess, talk about if we want to move forward with number 3 and number 1 for the amendments. Then.
It doesn't look like any of those have any bearing on any human welfare component, but I don't know if it may materially change the the ordinance? Is the committee more inclined to delay until after the Environmental Matters Committee has had its say, or to vote on favorably or not favorably at this time?
I'd be inclined to postpone, I think. I believe I'd be inclined to postpone till after the Environmental Matters Committee hears this. I mean, that is the committee that, whose bailiwick, I think, most obviously covers this type of legislation. I mean, I've got some pretty clear thoughts about it, but I think I'd rather hear from them first. I could easily vote tonight, but again, logically, I think we ought to wait and see what you folks do on your committee. I don't think it'll substantially delay the progress of this legislation, at least any more than it already has been delayed.
Alderwoman Tierney, your thoughts on?
I don't know how we can do this, but I'm sorry, even I misunderstood, and I'm on the environmental committee because we talk so much about that, kind of carving out what we're gonna do versus the county because they rejected it. So can we approve it subject to revised language? I mean, help me out here, I'd hate to delay it just because, again, it's the county's, hello, Steve Shu, but, I'd hate to delay it on a rewording, if you will, that I am confident that the environmental committee can resolve. So I don't know if I can make a motion to pass this subject to the environmental committee, rewriting it to address the latest vote of rejection of Anne Arundel County.
It sounds like if the amendments that the Environmental Matters Committee was proposing, if we just vote on it absent those amendments, that it in its original form is not dependent on the county's, the county having those same provisions. But if we vote on just ordinance 02218 as it was originally drafted, that the only reference there to the county code is the enforcement section, which I believe would still be relevant, but it would not act to supplant this for that. But I think we can, if everyone's comfortable on voting on the original form of it, knowing that the amendments that are attached are not what we're voting on, and those amendments that are attached are subject to change.
Bingo, bango. Yes, I agree, Madam Chair.
And Alderman Payon, do you feel comfortable voting tonight as well?
We can, it just seems like, I don't know why we would without knowing what the Environmental Matters Committee has done, but sure.
Well, let me reiterate, I'm on if this is fair, I am on the committee, and I understand what they need to do, which is to make it in line with the county's recent rejection of the law. So I agree with the chair's path forward that we agree on the original premise, subject to amendments by the Environmental Matters Committee. That way it can progress linearly. Ugh, a mouthful.
I agree that way. When the Environmental Matters Committee is having it under review, they will know that we have reviewed it for its impact on human welfare, and that it has been recommended favorably or not favorably by the Housing and Human Welfare Committee, and they can make their amendments if they so choose, with full knowledge of that. So at this time, is there a motion to recommend it favorably to the council?
Yes, I motion that we recommend this legislation as originally written, without the amendments, favorably. We make our recommendation to council in the interest of health and human welfare.
I would second Madam Chair, with the understanding that when this comes up to a vote for the council, depending on amendments, I may or may not be supporting it at that time.
Understood. It's been properly moved in second. All in favor of recommending it favorably, state aye.
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 The ayes have it. The recommendation carries. I believe that is our last agenda item. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
And I second.
All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. You're probably still on camera, so I'm just going to say that he is dear and wonderful.
Let me tell you